Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wolves. Today on the show, breaking down Karl-Anthony Towns' role in the Timberwolves offense, how it's evolved, how he's changed, and what to look for this season as Cat and Ant split the majority of possessions in the Wolves offense. We'll also talk about the preseason schedule for the Wolves, which is now fully out. It's all upcoming. Welcome in. You are Locked On Wolves.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. Today's episode is brought to us by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, which is just 9 days away, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Happy Friday, everybody. Happy weekend. Hopefully you've had a fantastic week. Today, I want to dive into Karl-Anthony Towns. I want to talk a little bit about his role in the Timberwolves offense, how that's evolved over the past couple of years as Ants emerged as a true star in the league and an offensive force, and what that might look like this year, what Cat could do to become a little bit more efficient and effective. It's not a full Karl-Anthony Towns player preview for the season. We're going to save that for a couple of weeks from now, but I want to dive a bit into his offense. We'll close by talking a bit about the preseason schedule. We're like less than 3 weeks away, I think, for the first preseason game. So lots to get to today. A big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. All right. So Karl-Anthony Towns, of course, the younger version of Karl-Anthony Towns was the focal point of everything the Timberwolves did, right? Number 1 overall pick, played every single game the first 3 seasons of his career, best player on the team, unquestionably, other than when Jimmy Butler was here for a season plus. This was Karl-Anthony Towns' world. He was frequently seen as there was at least one NBA.com GM survey that they do in the offseason where the GMs overwhelmingly voted for him as like who they'd start a team with today. He was seen as like really competent in the media and very mature for his age. And all of the things were pointing in the right direction for Cat. The Jimmy Butler, Tom Thibodeau divorce kind of set things off in a poor direction. And then the first COVID season, remember, Karl-Anthony Towns was injured. That was his first year where he actually got hurt. I think the first time he missed games was maybe the season prior when he got into that car accident. And I don't know that he actually had a concussion, but it was a serious car accident, missed a game or two. That was either that first season he ever missed a game or the next year that he had the knee issue. He had a wrist issue mixed in there. And he's actually only played over 70 games one time over the past 5 years now. So injuries have crept in and become an issue. The team obviously didn't have success after Butler was gone. The D'Angelo Russell experiment didn't turn out well. The Gerson Rosas debacle. Through it all, Karl-Anthony Towns, when he's been on the floor, has been a remarkably consistent player. And that's the point I'm making here. And also, in addition to him being consistent, it's I did say through it all, but also like his role has changed too. It's not like he's had the same role every year. Early in his career, he was the focal point up until just a couple of years ago. And now over the past year and a half or so, really 2 seasons, although he didn't play a whole lot in 22-23 because of the calf injury, he's been asked to play a completely different position. So he's had, I don't know, just ballparking it, I think 5 different coaches. You could include Flip Saunders, who drafted him, right? I mean, Saunders, Mitchell, Saunders, like, I don't know, I guess I've been doing this on the fly. Saunders, Mitchell, Flip Saunders, Sam Mitchell, Tom Thibodeau, Ryan Saunders, and Chris Finch. So yeah, 5 head coaches. He's had 3 or 4 different GMs. He's had multiple ownership groups now with the Rodriguez-Laurie group being involved. All of that stuff, and now he's finally getting to the playoffs with more consistency later in his career. He's also, as I alluded to, the role has shifted dramatically from being the focal point. Very early in his career, it was all post-ups. I shouldn't say all, but mostly post-ups. He only shot 88 three-pointers his first season in the NBA, barely more than 1 3-pointer per game, and he was 34%. Year 2, that went up to a little over 3. The next couple of years, under under Tom Thibodeau that crept up slightly. And then he gets Ryan Saunders as a head coach, and he's jacking tons of threes. And now that number is settled somewhere in the middle. And he's no longer playing center. He's playing power forward next to the best defensive center of this generation, regardless of what Shaq might tell you in Rudy Gobert. Cat's now playing power forward, which means he's guarding power forwards. Early in his career, he was playing center. He was asked to protect the rim. Then he was being asked to play in a drop coverage under David Vanterpool as the defensive coordinator, and that was like all they ran. And then they went completely away from that, and it became a blitzing defense where Karl-Anthony Towns was key to defending the point of attack, pushing, pressuring the ball handlers on the perimeter of the opponent. And now under Chris Finch, well, actually, it's shifted. I mean, that was under Chris Finch when they were blitzing the perimeter. But now with Rudy Gobert on the team, they're back to playing more of a drop. But sometimes Cat's playing at the level. In fact, a lot of times he is when he's on the floor. If he's defending, if he's in the action, he's playing at the level. Like it's hard. I would challenge you to find another All-NBA player, a multiple-time All-NBA player, a 4-time All-Star, who has had to adapt as much to. I think you could say playing style, period, / position. But you could also lump in head coaches, front office, going from being the worst team in the league to one of the best 4 teams in the league very quickly, and back and forth. And all the stuff Karl-Anthony Towns has been through, and through it all, he's been extremely consistent. I mean, he's averaged a double-double. He averaged a double-double in his first 6 years of the league. And he's been, 20-plus points every year but his rookie year. For his career, 23 and 11. And that's just the counting stats, right? He's a 40% three-point shooter. He's been over 50% shooting in every year of his career, but 2 from the floor. He's been a consistent free throw shooter. He's only gotten better outside the arc, at the charity stripe. Period. Like the last 2 seasons were his best 2 years as a free throw shooter. Remarkably consistent through it all. So how has his role changed in the Timberwolves offense? Well, if you look at the numbers, the actual output in terms of the types of shots he's getting and the results they're getting from him, it hasn't changed a whole lot. The usage has gone down slightly over the past 3 years since Anthony Edwards came into the league, and I guess take out his rookie year. But after Ant's rookie year, which happened to be Karl-Anthony Towns' highest usage rate, it's been the 3 lowest usage rates we've seen since 2017-18 from Cat. Last year, he was up slightly, but the year prior, he played only 29 games, so it wouldn't be too hard to throw that one out. Like the overall shot selection, I'll dive a bit deeper into this here in a minute, but it hasn't changed that drastically. He's kind of back to middle of the pack career-wise in terms of shooting threes. Like he's obviously shooting more than he did very early in his career under Tibbs and prior, but he's not shooting as many as he did under Ryan Saunders or even, early Chris Finch years, early Chris Finch game, half seasons. Go back to the 2021 season. So that hasn't changed that drastically. So what does his role look like moving forward with an emerging Anthony Edwards? Of course, Cat himself has the Supermax kicking in, and there's always those trade rumors that are out there. But what does the shot profile look like for Cat? What does the role in the offense look like? And how can they use him in a more efficient way? Because there were times last year where there were a couple numbers that do stick out as not troublesome, but took a bit of a dip last year for Cat. So I want to dive a bit into that, but then also kind of paint a picture for what I think is next for Karl-Anthony Towns and the Timberwolves offense. Now that I've kind of set up like where we're at here, but the short version is Cat's adapted through everything. What's his role? Like, what does this turn into for him? And we'll get to that here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends at FanDuel. You've heard me talk a lot about FanDuel here at Locked On Wolves. It's America's #1 sportsbook for a reason. Well, we have something a little different for you right now. Now through September 22nd, which is like a week and a half away, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment you can cancel anytime. Again, you have 9 days to knock that out. Just $5. You'll get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket on YouTube and YouTube TV. And if that's not enough, be sure to check out FanDuel's Profit Boost in the app and use it for FanDuel's Double Your Winnings for all of Sunday, September 15th. All of the pregame moneyline bets. That's this Sunday, just a couple of days away. Profit Boost will be live starting Thursday, the 12th, which is yesterday. So it's live right now. Profit Boost is. So use it in the app for FanDuel's Double Your Winnings for all of this Sunday's pregame moneyline bets. View your account page now to learn more about your boost. Just visit FanDuel.com and download America's #1 sportsbook. Big thank you once again for making Locked On Wolves your first listen of the day. For your second listen, go enjoy the Locked On NBA podcast. There's no offseason in the NBA, and Locked On NBA provides daily basketball analysis from national and local experts in 30 minutes or less. No one keeps you as informed and entertained as Locked On NBA. Available on YouTube or wherever you get podcasts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right. So Karl-Anthony Towns, how has his role changed in the Timberwolves offense? Again, the overall shot profile hasn't changed that much. However, he shot slightly less threes and slightly less free throws recently. Why is that? And I do want to get into, there's a couple other numbers that are different, but I want to talk about the shot profile first. Number one, getting to the free throw line less is the biggest concern to me. It's not actually the slight dip in 3-point shooting, because I think a lot of that is I don't know. That I would say they're probably pretty close to equal concern. We just know he's such a good free throw shooter and such a good 3-point shooter that any shot he takes that doesn't lead to a 3-point attempt, that isn't the 3-point attempt, or have high potential for an opportunity to get to the free throw line, is not an efficient shot, because he's so good from everywhere else. And he's fine as a mid-range jump shooter. You look at last year, he shot 40% outside 16 feet on twos. He shot 45% on 10 to 16 feet. The year prior, which is a small sample, he was 55% on long twos. The year before that, he was mid to high 30s, which isn't great. But that's a skill set he has. Obviously, he can shoot mid-range jumpers. But Cat is such a good and efficient 3-point shooter, and so good at the rim, and so good at getting to the line, and so good at the free throw line, that he's robbing himself of points and efficiency when he shoots anything that's not at the rim or outside the arc. The 3-point rate was down slightly this year. Now, the year prior, again, just 29 games. So it's less than 1,000 minutes. Last year, he played 2,026 minutes, over 2,000 minutes. So it is a small sample. The year before that, which was also an all-star season, the 21-22 season, which ended in the Wolves as the 6th seed and losing to Memphis in the playoffs, the first full season under Chris Finch, was his lowest free throw rate since the 18-19 season, which was, I think, the year that started with Jimmy Butler. It was the Tibbs year when Tibbs got fired. That year, he had a free throw rate of just 0.27, or 3-point rate of just 0.27, which means only 27% of his field goal attempts were threes. It spiked under Ryan Saunders, 44% the next year when he had a bit of an injury issue and his COVID shortened. Then it was 36% the year after that. But the first the year under Finch, when they went to the playoffs, lost to Memphis, he only attempted 30% of his shots from outside the arc. In the 2 years since then combined, he's been a bit higher. It's gotten up to about 36%, which is at least where it should live. So that number hasn't been drastically off. The free throw rate declining is slightly more concerning to me, because it's been happening for a longer period of time. You can go back to late Tibbs, early Ryan Saunders, when the free throw rate was 0.36, which is basically for every field goal attempt he takes, he gets 0.36 free throws. So 30. Yeah, that's the best way to say it. That number's gone down slightly. It was up to, actually, his career high was in the 21-22 season, but that's a bit of an outlier. If you go back 5-6 years, it spiked, and then the last 2 years it's way down. Part of it is he's turning the ball over a lot more, which we'll talk more about in a second. Part of it is an increase in turnovers. Part of it is he's shooting a few more of those floaters, kind of where he stop and pop fadeaway type, almost the Dirk, not entirely the face-up Dirk one-legged shot, but he's been doing it a little bit from mid-range as well. He's been shooting from weird angles on the side, trying to draw fouls, and he likes to throw the ball up on the backboard as he's kind of falling to the baseline, which thankfully him and Nas, I feel like, fell down less times combined per game last season than they did the year prior. But he's kind of, the degree of difficulty in some of these shots has complicated matters. And it's robbed him from getting some of these just easier points by getting to the free throw line. Overall, like over at Basketball Index, B-Ball Index, which is a great website, they rate his one-on-one play mostly positive, mostly A's. The playmaking ability we'll get to in a second And his drives are in finishing is really good. Like he's got A's and A minuses across the board finishing when he actually gets to the rim. Total shots at the rim per 75 possessions is 82nd percentile, but that's down a little bit from the year prior. Total drives per 75 possessions 85th percentile. That's fine. Unassisted rim field goal attempts per 75 possessions. You got an A on that. Rim shot creation, an A minus 83rd percentile, which is his ability to get to the rim. So again, it's good. I'm nitpicking here like we did with Ant the other day, but he's such an efficient player that he's robbing himself of easier scoring opportunities. Post-up opportunities, those were actually up a little bit last year, and I think that contributed to him shooting less free throws. Again, the free throw rate was down slightly last year from the year before, but the last 2 years down significantly from the 5 years before that. Like, the last 2 seasons have been his lowest free throw rates since 2016-17, his second year in the league. His first year under Tom Thibodeau. These are the lowest free throw rates of his career. Again, it hasn't coincided. It's not simply because he's shooting more threes. That's a little bit of it, but it's also because the things I just mentioned. He's stopping and popping more, probably tried to avoid drawing offensive fouls. Mid-range jumpers are up slightly, not drastically. Post-ups were up slightly this last year over the couple of years prior, and I think that's okay. He's a solid post player. The points per possession is fine. It's just a shade under 1 point per possession. It's okay. But again, it's always less than a 3-point shot and always less than a shot at the rim for Karl-Anthony Towns. And you're less likely to get fouled on a post-up attempt. And frankly, with Cat, he's just as likely to commit an offensive foul, which, an aside, which is actually kind of related to my next point, I want to talk turnover rate, is if you look at the types of fouls he's committed, he's had the highest percentage of his fouls being offensive fouls in the league for a long time. Remember 3 years ago, he committed 68 offensive fouls. That was the year I just mentioned where his 3-point rate was down significantly. He also committed 68 offensive fouls. For context, last year he committed 52 and it felt like he was doing it all the time. And he's committing, like, essentially the last several years, the number of offensive fouls he's committed has been at or more than 50% of his defensive fouls. In other words, for every 2 defensive fouls he commits, he's been committed at least 1 offensive foul. That's crazy. That's a crazy rate to be racking up fouls because it's of course a double or maybe even triple jeopardy when you commit an offensive foul, because not only is it a personal foul, but it's a turnover, and you're also robbing your team of an offensive possession, which I guess is baked into it being a turnover, but you're not getting a shot attempt, right? You're not getting a chance to score for your team. So it's that much more damaging to commit an offensive foul. And Karl-Anthony Towns is still doing that at an amazingly high clip. His turnover rate last season was the second highest in his career, second only to the year before, of course, just 29 games. But the turnover rate is just too high over the last 2 years. Before that, the 4 years prior were all hovering in the mid 13%, which you can handle when you've got a usage rate that's nearly 30. With a lower usage rate over the past couple of years, the turnover rate has gone up. And last year, it was the lowest assist rate we've seen since year 2 under Tibbs in 2017-18. And this is the point. I think what's most important. The ball should just start in Karl-Anthony Towns' hands more often. Ant can bring the ball up the floor. Conley can bring the ball up the floor. Get it to Karl-Anthony Towns, whether it's high post, whether it's horns action, you dump it to Cat, and you're running something off that, dribble handoffs, whatever. Some backside actions where he's got the ability to throw to cutters along the baseline, or, Ant running something where Ant gives the ball to Cat. Somebody sets a down screen for Ant and he's coming around, off a pin down, gets to the corner for a catch and shoot jumper, whatever it is. Run the offense through Cat. He's a good enough passer. Also, if he's got the ball in his hands, yes, there's a chance he commits an offensive foul, but it depends on where you're giving him the ball. And if you're giving him the ball at the elbow or in the mid post, it's a little bit less likely than if he's facing up on the perimeter. Now, I don't want to take away Cat face-ups because he's so dynamic in those. And I was expecting there to be some change in terms of frequency or success rate, success rate, I guess, efficiency in different play types. And again, it hasn't changed that much other than post-ups going a little bit. His drives per game have been remarkably consistent for the most part of the last 3 or 4 years. His success rate on those, the points per possession, spot up opportunities, isolation, which hasn't been as efficient as it should be. It's all been remarkably similar. So my thing here is on those drives, he's either got to get to the rim or he's got to distribute. So I think the drives are fine. Get him the ball more at the elbow. Get him the ball more in the mid post, kind of the Jokic spot on the floor, right? The free throw line, elbow extended on the wings, and let the offense flow through him. Ant's going to get his shots. When Cat's off the floor, Ant's getting every shot. When Cat's on the floor, Ant's going to be the beneficiary of a lot of Cat's passing. Ant's gravity should allow Cat to go one-on-one against guys. And of course, what teams have decided to do is put smaller guys on Cat, figure they'll get 1 or 2 offensive fouls, and then Cat's in foul trouble, and it throws him off his game. And that's worked pretty well. There's nothing else we can say about that. He's just got to be smarter with his arms, smarter with the way he uses his body. But I just think overall, more touches for Karl-Anthony Towns is the answer. And I do think it's that simple. And we know Chris Finch can scheme up offense. It was a little bit the last couple of years. It hasn't been as creative as maybe as it should be. But getting Cat the ball more, again, in horn sets, in actions where he's in the mid post, free throw line extended, and can make those decisions. He's maybe a little bit less. It's challenging to double there and at the doubles and at the nail in the middle of the floor, right? It's very challenging to double there. It's also less likely Cat's going to commit an offensive foul than in a face-up situation, or frankly, even than in a post-up situation where he struggled to do that as well. In general, you figure there's less likely to be a foul called there, but he struggled in that area too. So more possessions for Cat. Shot selection can be about the same. Just on those drives, either distribute for others or don't fade away from the basket. Don't put yourself in a spot where the official's not going to give you a foul call. Karl-Anthony Towns' role in this year's offense is super important because teams are going to key in on Anthony Edwards. And he's just got to be a little bit more efficient than he was last year. Roughly the same amount of threes, get to the line a little bit more, less mid-range, less floaters, distribute more to teammates, keep doing what you're doing. And Karl-Anthony Towns has been a remarkably consistent offensive player over the past, how many years has he been with the Wolves? 9 years? Over his 9-year career with Minnesota, he's been a remarkably consistent player and adaptable too. Now, this is the year where he's just got to kind of put it all together in a support role for Ant. And hopefully he doesn't have the bad luck. Like, remember, this was an all-star campaign for Cat. He gets the knee injury, and we haven't talked enough about this. I talked about it on the Minnesota basketball party a couple weeks ago. But Cat came back from this meniscus injury remarkably fast, and nobody talked about it. But you turn on a Sixers game, and all they talked about was Joel Embiid in the playoffs coming back from the knee injury. Who played better? Who was on the floor more? Who played harder for his team? And, who was more impactful, whose team played farther? It's Karl-Anthony Towns. Cat coming back from that injury last year was crazy. We'll talk more about that later because I'm going to bring that up as much as I can. I think people need to the basketball community needs to realize what Cat went through to get back on the floor. And he touched on a little bit on, I think it was Paul George's podcast this offseason. But it was remarkable what Cat went through and then also what he was still able to contribute in the playoffs. So all that to say, Cat's clearly a huge part of this team this season and is going to need to provide a lot of support for Ant in terms of the Wolves offense. All right. Let's close by looking at the Timberwolves preseason schedule. It's a pretty interesting slate. We'll get to that here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is sponsored by BetterHelp. What's something that you would love to learn? As an adult, do you make time to learn new things as often as you'd like, or is that something you lost in your childhood? I know for me, it's really tough to learn new stuff. It's hard to carve out the time to actually do it. Like, I have kids. My kids are always learning and growing. As adults, we lose our curiosity, right? It's same old, same old. Just think about something you'd love to learn. Maybe it's like gardening or something. Maybe not in the fall, but something like that. Or it could be just as you're getting ready to head inside, hunker down for the winter, maybe something like bowling or like playing the guitar. Like you want to get good at one of those other things. Therapy can help you reconnect with your sense of wonder because your back to school era, we're all in the back to school era right now, can come at any age. If you're thinking of starting therapy, consider giving BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Rediscover your curiosity with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. All right, Timberwolves preseason schedule. We've, of course, had the regular season schedule out for a while. The preseason schedule is now finalized. Believe it or not, the Timberwolves' first preseason game is Friday, October 4th. Today is Friday, September 13th. That is 3 weeks from today. So 3 weeks from today, if you're listening to this on Friday, or less than 3 weeks, if you're listening to it over the weekend, the Timberwolves will start their preseason against the Los Angeles Lakers in LA. It's of course a 9:30 Central tip. I would imagine, I don't think Bally has released the local TV schedule, but I'd imagine that game would be televised locally. Anyway, at the Lakers, then they go home. Well, not actually home. They go to Des Moines to take on the Philadelphia 76ers the following Friday. So they have a week off between their first two preseason games. That first one's very early, and a little bit weird. It's not a national TV game. But then they go to Des Moines to take on the Sixers on Friday, October 11th. So a week in between games there. Then they go at the Knicks at Madison Square Garden, Sunday afternoon game. So they go from Des Moines to Madison Square Garden for a 5 p.m. Central game on Sunday. That is an ESPN game against Tibbs and the Knicks on Sunday, October 13th. I don't know if or when the Vikings play that day, but keep that in mind. And then Wednesday, October 16th, the following week, they take on the Bulls in Chicago that's a 7 p.m. Central tip. The only Target Center home game, like true home game at Target Center in the preseason, is Friday, October 18th against the Denver Nuggets. And they kick off the regular season. Let's see, Friday, October 18th is the final preseason game. The regular season starts the following Tuesday, the 22nd, at the Lakers. So they start the regular season in the same place they start the preseason. They have a week break between their first and second preseason game. And then their final preseason games on a Friday. The first regular season game is that following Tuesday. And they go home for their final preseason game to the road at LA for game 1 on Tuesday, October 22nd. I think this is notable. They're probably playing in the three most, well, I don't know that you'd call the Lakers arena iconic at this point. It's not like it's the old Forum, but three of the most iconic road places to play, playing at the Lakers, at Madison Square Garden, and then at the United Center in Chicago, are their three road games as part of preseason. Only one game at Target Center, and that happens to be against Denver, which I'm sure at that point, like my guess would be, I suppose maybe they'll have starters play like the first quarter or something for the last preseason game. I think that's typically what they'll do. But if you're going to have them play, not a full game, but in both halves of a game, it's probably going to be those middle three games, right? In Des Moines, Friday, October 11th, and then the two road games at the Knicks and at the Bulls. Not that we ever really learned a lot from preseason. Of course, what's going to be most interesting is the amount of run and opportunity that Rob Dillingham and TJ Shannon get, as well as do Josh Minott and Leonard Miller get opportunities to earn rotation roles based on preseason play. Obviously, a lot's going to have to break right, or I guess wrong, on the injury front in that regard for those guys to get kids, or for at least for Shannon, Miller, and Minott to get playing time. But as we've said before, like Dillingham's in the rotation, like he's in the top 8. Your 9th guy is probably Joe Ingles, or let's do this. Let's say the 9, Dillingham and Ingles are in there along with Alexander Walker-Nasrid and the starters. Your 10th guy, as we've said, is TJ Shannon or Josh Minott / Leonard Miller. My guess is it's TJ Shannon most nights, depending on the matchup. It could be Minott. I think Leonard Miller's probably on the outside looking in. He'll spend some time in the G League with Jalen Clark and, I don't know, probably just Jalen Clark, because I think Daishen Nix probably will spend more time just on the bench cheerleading at the NBA level than he will in Des Moines. But this will be their opportunity. Like TJ Shannon's going to play 30 minutes in probably almost every preseason game, would be my guess. Rob Dillingham's going to Leonard Miller and Josh Minott are going to get plenty of run in preseason. He may also spend a lot of time in the G League. He's the third two-way guy in addition to Jalen Clark and Daishen Nix. Jesse Edwards, of course, the center, undrafted out of West Virginia. A very raw, light version of Rudy Gobert, if you will. That's his playing style. Easiest, most concise way to describe it. So there's a lot of intrigue in preseason for those reasons, more than anything else. And, of course, 2 years ago, the Wolves preseason was very rocky because you had Gobert coming off a Eurobasket, was banged up. You had Karl-Anthony Towns with the illness. That's forgotten about by a lot of folks because then he had the calf injury later in that season. So there was very little, like Gobert and Cat, I think, played a handful of minutes together in preseason 2 years ago. So that's less of a concern this time around because they just played most of a season and into June together in the playoffs. But also, trying to get that chemistry back. Gobert just played with France. Cat hasn't played. Like, these guys have taken the summer off. Everybody else taking the summer off. So like getting the opportunity to get back together and gel, that's the other kind of goal of the preseason. And now with the status of a team that went to the conference finals, they should be hungry and they need to come out hungry, but they're also, the regular season approach may be a little bit different, especially early on. And of course, they're going to need to get Rob Dillingham some run. They're going to need to get TJ Shannon some run, even into the regular season. I mean, think of what Denver was doing earlier last year with Zeke Naji, and of course, Christian Brown ended up staying in the rotation. Julian Strother, some of these guys that were out of the rotation by the end of the year got a bunch of run early because they were trying to figure it out. And of course, it didn't end up really working for Denver, grand scheme of things, at least not in terms of playoff success. But the Wolves will need to get in front of that in preseason and also early in the regular season as well. All right, that's all we got for you today. Next week, we're back to daily. We're going to start to roll through some player previews here pretty soon. We'll see how the weekend goes. We may get into that early next week. But again, daily, Monday through Friday, starting next Monday, September 16th, we're daily all the way until next August. So buckle up. The season's about to start. 3 weeks away for the preseason opener. A big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. You can also watch the show on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. And you can follow on X at Locked On T-Wolves and also at Beecken with 2 B's, 2 E's, C-K-E-N. Of course, the Locked On Wolves podcast is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Remember, the Locked On Network is your local experts at all the biggest stories. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.